Welcome. This is our I think it's our 10th webinar this
Mhm.
year, and we've been running this series for all year, basically one a month. And today we're talking about how to transform any culture using this 10-step proven formula, which I've seen Ed go through it a number of times, and it's really the basis of everything that we're bringing to you this year. So let's move on here just a little. Now, this is an interactive webinar, and so we really encourage you to bring up your questions and participate with us. But our promise here is that there are many companies that allow their culture to emerge by accident, and they're often unhappy with what they discover. But you can shape your company culture and make it attractive to all stakeholders when you take an active role in developing it. So that's really like what we're talking about today is how do you look at your culture? How do you assess it? And how do you shape it into what you actually want? Because that's the basis of how you draw people to you. Because
Mhm.
when you can market your culture to the people you're attracting, recruiting becomes a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
So, in terms of participating in this, if you have any questions at any time,
Mhm.
or if we're asking for you to throw in any responses, you type them into the chat, uh,
Mhm.
or
We'll
raise
put it
your
in the chat.
hand or pipe up, and we're monitoring that, and we'll be looking at the questions. Also, we've seen you before. Ed knows you personally, so we're in a lot of cases. So we're happy to interact and take on problems, questions, and things that you may be experiencing personally. And the beauty of that is it helps everyone find scenarios that we can
Mm.
all learn from. So today's webinar is for you if your culture is not where you want it to be. Maybe you have a vision, there's a vision and mission for your company, and the whole company is not necessarily all on board. So we'll show you some things you can do to
Mhm.
handle that. And if there are aspects about your culture that you like, but you feel that there are people fighting against it, well, that's a really difficult thing to manage when it's just happening right in front of you. But what you'll see, and Ed will share from a lot of personal experiences with companies he's worked with, and with dealing with really difficult teams, like at every single level, there are things you can do about this when you
Mhm.
identify the right aspects of the culture you want to change.
Mhm.
And finally, if you want to get your whole team on board with a culture that keeps everyone engaged, happy, and productive, imagine it's like if you could just get everybody on the same page and an agreement with where we're going as a company, like you tell that to any leader and they're just like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. So that's what we're talking about today. So what are you going to discover in this session? We'll talk about why culture is kind of like this amorphous blob. Ed likes to call it an amoeba, and it takes time to shape it because it's just like you push on it on one side and it kind of goes the other way. And you really need to get a all-encompassing view of what your people think and feel so that you can contain this thing.
Yep.
And two, you can talk about how to get the key influencers of culture and how these key influencers may not be who you think they are.
That's a fun one.
I'll bet. And then finally, how to make the difficult decisions when you have players that aren't on board. Another fun one.
Yeah, and that's not as obvious an answer as we might think.
So why do we do this webinar series? And we've been doing it for the past year, having a lot of fun with it.
Mhm.
And why are we bringing it to you free? Well, first of all, it's just something that we want to put out there, and we know that by sharing things that we know, we can help a lot of people. And when we give, we also get to get an inside look at what people have going on in their company. And we'll tell you, at the end of the webinar, how you can get some of our time if you want to have us take a peek at what's going on in your company. And two, we want to make a difference in the quality of workplaces. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why I care about that in just a minute.
Mhm.
And then finally, we enjoy seeing employers and employees thrive because when everybody's happy in the workplace, it's more fulfilling for everyone. And that just kind of makes the world a better place.
Mhm.
Now, next month, get you to mark your calendars for the 8th of November. And what we'll be talking about is the 8 retention and motivation strategies to steal talent from the big boys. So we came up with this title a while back when we were working with another company that it was really great. The great place to work is an engineering firm. And they were having a lot of trouble because people just kept on going to larger companies that had a more established sort of brand out there in the marketplace. But when we looked into this company, there were so many positives and so many things that were better than what the bigger companies were offering, that all they had to do was market that, like put it out in their recruitment and out on their careers page, and people started coming to them. And it's kind of built on what we're talking about today, but
Mhm.
that's what we'll be sharing next month. So mark your calendar for November 8th.
So now we went backwards. There we go.
All right. So why do you want to listen to us? Well, first I'll give you a little background on me. You might be thinking, like, who's this Dr. Paul guy? Well, I'm a chiropractor. And what does that have to do with recruiting? Well, let me tell you what my vision on this is. And the fact of the matter is, like, I spent 20 years working with, on the other side of the desk from most of you, I guess, dealing with the employees that would come into my office complaining about the aches and pains, like back pain, stress, and tension. And like the pain in the neck, the pain in the butt was often somebody in the workplace or something that was really bugging them and causing them a lot of stress um, and turning into physical pain. And I got really tired of just trying to fix a problem that was always persisting because there was no relenting to the stress. And what I decided was I wanted to get on the other side and see if I could make a change in how people worked so that they could be better, healthier, and create more wellness in the workplace so that we didn't have to treat people's wellness in my office. And that's how I kind of connected with Ed, because I got really good at interviewing people and finding out what's going on and what the real problem is and how it related to their physical problems.
Mhm.
And then Ed, he got me from a webinar that I was doing with a friend of mine that he was working with, and he asked, "Hey, could you help me with some of the storytelling in my work, in my presentations?" And it started with this kind of interview where he says I sucked his brain out and then spit it back out to him. So I'll let him kind of explain how that works in a nice way. So I'll pass it to you, Ed.
Yeah. Well, there's not much in there, right? So to pull it out and throw it back in, there's well, that was an easy process. But hey, I think just about everybody in here knows me. I see a lot of familiar names. I'm Ed Crow. I've been doing this consulting gig for over 20 years now, and what I really enjoy is playing at the strategy table. And I know many of you that are in the room today are at that level in your careers. We're trying to figure out. We're at the table. We're not banging on the door, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the next big strategic imperative for us? And most of this webinar series that we've done this year is all about how do we compete for talent. And in fact, this webinar series has come out of a talk that Paul and I did at a conference, I guess, last year about this time, Paul. We were asked to put this kind of 3-hour presentation together, and it really dawned on us like, oh my gosh, we could really blow this up and share this with more folks. And so that's how this webinar series came about. And I'm here in Maine actually to talk at 1 o'clock today on this very topic of how do we compete for talent. It's my belief, based on the numbers that we're seeing, that this talent shortfall is not going away anytime soon. If you look at the retiring boomers and you look at the smaller generations coming up through now, good talent is not going to be easy to find at any point in the coming future. So if you're waiting on not that the economy has slowed down a tremendous amount, but if you're waiting on the economy to rebound, you're waiting on the next election cycle, whatever you think is going to change it, it's probably not. So the reality is that as HR professionals and as business leaders, we have to change what we're doing. We have to change our perspective on what it means to recruit, and to become a talent magnet. There are companies out there that are doing it really well. And in some of the previous webinars, we've shared those. But today, we're going to focus on the culture aspect. And as Paul mentioned, I like to call it an amoeba because it's always moving. And every time you swap a person out, someone retires and you hire someone resigns and you promote someone, things change just a little bit, right? And so I believe that culture needs to be managed, that it is a process. I used to tell this story that I had this owner tell me a few years ago that he didn't have a culture and what did he want to do about it? Well, I just had that asked of me last week. Hey, Ed, we don't really have a culture. Can you tell us how to get one? And I just started laughing. You have a culture. Everybody has a culture. That's silliness to think it doesn't exist. You just haven't identified what yours is yet. So what we're going to talk about today is this 10-step process. And Paul, it occurred to me, it's the 10th month of the year. We're talking about 10-step process. So what I want you to keep in mind is that this is a process. This is not a checklist. And people often ask me, how long does this process take? I can't answer that because every culture is so unique. You're going to blow through some steps and other steps are going to trip you up. And the steps that trip you up aren't going to trip somebody else up and so on. And what we know is that as we get through this culture transformation, it starts to really seep into every piece of our business and starts to uncover things. So if for those of you that are in like the manufacturing type sector, when you start talking about lean and Six Sigma, it's like you start with one area and next you realize, okay, well what we just did impacts this. Now we got to go fix that. Oh, now that impacts something else. Culture is very much the same way. And so let's jump into our 10-step process here. So the very first thing that we really need to take into consideration are what are the business outcomes we're trying to achieve. And so while most of you are in an HR role, I need you to think outside of HR for this one. What is our bank trying to do? What is our manufacturing floor trying to do? What is our construction site trying to do? Those may seem like very obvious answers, but you really need to dig in a little bit to figure out what are the key things that we want to measure, that we know if we measure them and hit those goals, our business thrives. So a couple of years ago, I was working with the board of an assisted living community. And I was brought in to really do some board development work, help them make some decisions and things. And in the course of that work, they were starting to voice concerns that maybe they didn't have the right CEO. And they asked me to sit down with the CEO and have a discussion and just kind of find out where he was at. So in the course of that discussion, I asked him about the goals that he's measuring. And so he turns me around, and on the wall of his office, he had these monster grid sheets all like taped together. And there was like 30 measures that he was tracking. And I just saw Melanie, I just saw your eyes get big. Right? Yeah, it's too much. And I said, why are you measuring 30 things? And he says, well, those are all the things that we've got to measure to make sure that our facility runs properly. I said, but why are you measuring them? Because that's my job. Now, this is where, so those of you that know me well, and Christine, it's good you have your camera off because you probably laugh. I'm a pretty direct guy. And, I believe that that's where that's what my clients value, that I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And I said to him, well, this is why you're failing. Right there on your wall that you're looking at every day. This is why you're failing. And he didn't like to hear that. But it was true. He wouldn't delegate some of those tasks to the rest of his C-suite to monitor and measure and work on. And in that case, it didn't end well for him. I mean, the board, after a couple of months, decided to remove him because he couldn't move things forward. And so I tell you that story because the key word here is few. I'm talking like less than 5. And the word concrete is the next that's the next important word. Like, these are things that are the foundation of what we want to do, and not just culturally, but for our business. We have to know who we are as a business in order to build a culture around that. So you might think, well, our business focus is very customer centric. Okay, great. There are three kind of business strategies, and one of them is a customer intimate culture, where people come to us because of their customer experience with us. So think like a Nordstrom, right? A lot of people like to shop Nordstrom because it's a very personalized shopping experience. Okay, so then we craft our business outcomes around that idea that we are a very customer intimate organization. And I'm going to halt there, because the rest of this culture piece has to do with this important strategy that I'm telling you about. Okay, so one is, are we a customer intimate organization? Okay, maybe not. So the next thing is, are you a product or service leader in your industry? So these are folks that are putting stuff out there that are cutting edge technologies, let's say, or cutting edge services. So here, think of like an Apple, right? People wait in line to get the latest iPhone, okay, because it's the cutting edge of technology. So Apple has a very product centric culture. They know that if they put the best product out there, people will flock to them. And more importantly, people will spend lots and lots of money for their product. Okay. And the third type of business strategy is someone that says, okay, we're going to drive value to our customers through how we run our operation. Like, we're going to just be so operationally tight that that's how we're going to drive revenue for ourselves and service for our customers. So here, think of like a UPS, a FedEx, okay? They have to be operationally excellent. And actually, another big one is Walmart. Yes, Walmart beats their vendors over the head in order to get low prices, but they also have an amazing logistics system in the background. So their focus on driving value for their customers starts first with their logistics system. So you have to identify which of those three buckets you fall in. Now, you probably have toes in the water of the other two, but there's one that is really your focus. So these business outcomes should be directly related to that business focus. And as you'll see as we go through our 10 steps, it's going to be really important, and this is where I hand it over to Paul, that this is the story that we tell to our people. Like, this is why we're in this bucket. Because if everyone says it's all about the customer, but if you're in a operationally excellent environment, your people have to understand why being operationally excellent impacts the customer. So with that, Paul, I'm going to toss it over to you to talk about the emotional commitment we need to drive surrounding these business outcomes.
Right. So now Ed's explained how once you've identified that the key or the concrete business objectives, what we want is, again, everybody focused on the same thing. If we all had that same destination in mind and we were all going to the same place, then we're not fighting each other. But so many times there's this things are disjointed. And when Ed said, think outside of HR, this is where things are really different for Ed and I in speaking to people, is that most of the time you've got the leadership and they're like, we're short people, and then they throw it to HR and they're just like, deal with it. And then, HR goes and does their thing that they always did and always have done. And it used to kind of work. And now we're in this different world where people are piping up and voicing their opinions and just saying, no, I'm not going to do that. You can't make me, all this sort of stuff. And we're ending up with problem after problem because these positions stay open. We can't find people. And what we're seeing now is that the companies that are successful, people that are having a lot of success with recruiting the right people and keeping them, it's because leadership and HR are partnered on this and they're strategic about how they go about getting the right people for the right roles to achieve their business objectives, which means that leadership has to have a whole new understanding and respect for the work that we do in HR. And in HR, we have to have a whole new mindset about what we're doing. And that's what the whole purpose of this series is changing the mindset that we have, the importance of what we're doing, and thinking beyond the bounds of what has traditionally been considered HR. And what it starts with is making sure that our stories align. You got leadership, and they're saying, okay, our story is that this key business objective, if it's, that the customer centric one, it's we're all about the customer and making that experience incredible. Great. So that's what we're talking about. And then they're just like, okay, fill the roles, get the right people in, and let's do it. But then somehow the leader's message does not get aligned with all the people that we hire. It's not being told or shared, and it's not being done properly. Or we think we're jamming it down their throat and they get it. Well, the key here is we need them behind it. We need our people behind the message. We need everyone on the same mission with the same vision going the same direction. And how do you know if that's true? Well, you need to ask them. And this is why Ed and I work together, is because I love asking people what they really think. And I love finding what people say and seeing if it actually lines up with what they feel, because people never tell you what they feel. They never tell you what's really going on, and they love to tell you what they think you want to hear. And that's always a case. And they actually fool themselves into believing that what they're saying is true. And nothing will make you more at odds with like your well-being and your body than telling yourself one thing and having something else actually be going on in the background. It's kind of, will cause you all sorts of anxiety, stress, physical discomfort, illness, and diseases that, you can treat them till the cows come home, cut any part of your body off or whatever. But if you are at odds with what's going on inside, you will not be well. So I love finding out what's really going on. So I just ask questions and I go, you told me this, but it looks like you actually think that. Could there be something there? And being able to get people to reveal that, it's a fun little dance, because like if you go too far, people are like, whoa, you know what? Like, I'm not going to talk to you. And they shut right down. But if you do it in the right incremental step, and this is what Ed's talking about with the brain suck, you can sneak in there and get them to reveal things to you. And so I love it. Like we've done these focus groups, we've done it one-on-one, and just getting people to get comfortable with talking about how they really feel. You can find out what the emotional sort of climate in your company is. And in some cases, yes, you can do surveys and you can conduct these focus groups in-house, but again, you end up with people trying to tell you what they think you want to hear, people that are just trying to protect themselves and not not rock the boat, because everybody really, they just want to keep their jobs and they don't want to get in trouble or stick out. So when you get somebody in that has no affiliation with anything, they don't actually care, they just want to find out what's really going on, we can create a safe environment where people are feeling a little more free about saying what they really think and feel. And of course, this has to be truly, truly confidential. You cannot go in there and go, well, who was that? And what did they say? Because if you violate that trust and that confidence, it's not going to work. So I've seen both things happen, where it's been totally confidential, or when somebody from like HR shows up and they're in there, like people behaved differently. So we really want the truth to get that emotional aspect of how the climate is emotionally in your company. And when we have that, we can say, how far is it from what we really want to be happening? And what are we actually dealing with over here? because when we know the distance between that, we can start to figure out how to bridge that. And the rest of the steps that you see here are going to be about bridging the gap between what we need it to be and what's actually there. And once we have that, we can go, okay, how do we get everybody on board with that vision? And the secret is you got to make that vision, we have to make our vision their vision. And they have to be thinking, if I do this, it's going to make my life better. So we got to think of that what's in it for me factor. And that's the biggest thing that changes everything here. We get leadership on board with what's in it for me with the employees, and we get HR on board with what's in it for me with the employees, and everybody's figuring out how everybody can win here. So that's the emotional commitment that I'm talking about. And does that come across sort of clearly? What do you think, Ed? Is that making sense there?
Yeah, it is all about, and even our little icon here, our little icon, the dude's got his hand over his heart, right? I mean, our emotional state comes out in our actions. And so when you have people that are emotionally committed, like to their core, they're with you all the way. You see it in their actions. You see how much they care. You see how they approach problem solving. You see how they approach the challenges of the day. And it really is the foundation. After we know where we're going in step one, getting the people on board with that route is key. And this can take time to develop. So again, these 10 steps, they are rather linear, not completely, but they are rather linear. This one takes a long time. And it really depends on where you're at right now. And I don't think, based on most of the people that I know in the room, I don't think any of you are unionized, which makes step 2 a lot easier. You get a union environment, that gets a little bit tougher sometimes. It can be done, but a little bit tougher.
Yeah, that what's in it for me factor kind of gets a little blurred there.
Exactly. Yep.
So from getting, once you get the emotional sort of climate, then what we can do is start thinking about how do we make this a compelling experience? And by designing a compelling experience, what we're talking about is making the buy-in of the employees something that they want to do, making it something that really, not only like, are you going to get benefits by like, you have a great job, we're rewarding you well, and we'll give you benefits to do it, and whatever, all the things that you have to adjust in HR to make the employee experience good, but we're making it something that they feel like, I get something out of really supporting this. It means something to me to support this. So yeah, hand over the heart. Like, I want to be here. I love supporting this vision and mission. And so by designing that compelling experience, we're talking about how do we take the stories, the story of the leadership, the story of the people, and align them so that we know that when they're acting on something and they're doing their jobs, they're doing it for their own reasons, but their own reasons are in alignment with our reasons. And again, you have to ask, you have to really listen to the things you want to hear and the things you don't want to hear, because it is those little things when people, you see that little bit of hesitation, or you feel that there's a little discord between what they're saying and what actually is going on. You have to find that underlying sort of current, because that can take you way off course. It can take things and just sabotage them, and you end up on the rocks. So it's very important to, again, get people to feel comfortable enough to express freely what they're really feeling. And what I've found, and it's really kind of fun, is even when things seem like, questionable or a little bit rocky or dodgy, like, people, like when I talk to someone in HR and they're like, yeah, we don't know how it's going to go. The nice thing is when you get people to actually vocalize what they want, and they start to feel like, hey, there's people here that think the same way as me, we're being listened to, whatever, that already starts to shift the culture. It already starts to shape your story, and you start to see that, hey, there's, we thought that there was maybe a big problem here, but there's little embers of hope here and there. And when you start finding those little embers of like, oh, the story that we want to have happening here, there's a little fire there and there's a little fire there. That's when we start figuring out we can fan these fires. And you're going to see that, further down in the process, that there are going to be some key influencers. There's people that have influence, and there's impact roles that where if you actually start working with them first, you can fan those fires and get it to become a blaze. And that's what we really want to do here. So I'll throw it back to you there, Ed, and we can
Yeah.
carry
Yeah,
on the
we're going to
process.
talk a lot more about the experience in these next couple of steps, but we also have a neat opportunity for you to learn more about experience coming up here too. So I'm going to tease that out. So you're wondering, okay, where do we start with all of this? Okay. Especially if most of you in here have larger size organizations. And so the task can be daunting. And so what we suggest is that you look at your highest impact roles. Now, when you look at this, this does not necessarily mean highest on the org chart, right? Who is impacting your culture and your customers' experience the most? What roles are going to have the most impact on those concrete business outcomes you outlined in number one? So I'll tell you a little bit out from my own experience. So when I was in college, I worked the docks at UPS. And so, the boxes are coming down, you're loading them on the trucks, and off go the drivers. No one really, I had this concept that obviously I got to get the right box on the right truck kind of thing in the right spot. But, no one really explained to me how I can impact the driver's day. And that if I put the wrong box on the wrong truck, there's some customer that's not getting their box today. They're going to get it tomorrow, right? And so when most people think about UPS, they automatically think about the drivers. And I would argue the drivers may have the highest impact related to customer relations because they see that face every single day. But the drivers, UPS is an operationally excellent company. And so based on those business outcomes, the people that actually have the highest impact on the company making money are the part-timers working on the docks, because they're the ones that are getting the right boxes on the right trucks. And if they don't, mayhem ensues. And so as you're looking at the roles you want to start with, I want you to think about that. Who's having the most impact? Maybe it is someone who's customer facing, but maybe it's not. So you have to have an open mind here. And I know in some of Paul's work in our projects, he spends a lot of time with our clients trying to identify, okay, who are the highest impact roles for you? Like, who is it that we really need to start this entire process with? So in one case, we were working with a bank, and they're very much customer focused, right? So there was a lot of customer facing people in his focus groups, tellers and branch managers and lenders, people that are directly impacting the customer. But in another case with our engineers, yes, sometimes they were customer facing, but oftentimes these were the people out in the field making assessments. And so they never necessarily interacted with the customer. But because they're the project engineer, they're the ones that were going to determine how well that customer was satisfied at the end of the project. So again, it will vary for you based on what your strategy is and what your business outcomes are that you're trying to hit. That's what's going to determine the roles you want to start this process with. So we don't ever have a cookie cutter approach to say, yeah, go here. I call this one like the cherry picking. You all know if I go and where's that low hanging fruit that I can make some immediate impact, that's where we really want to start. Paul, anything you want to add there?
No, I think it's just identifying those people and then talking to them and finding out what they do and listening.
So this is the one, as HR professionals we all love, right? How do we change behavior? Well, see, here's the thing. If you go back to the two steps that Paul talked about, right? 2 and 3. If you've got someone who's emotionally committed to the organization and to what it's all about, and they've got a good work experience, which means it doesn't mean that every day is happiness and high fives and rose petals falling from the ceiling. It just means that they know overall the good days are far better than the bad, and that they're going to be able to get through the bad days because there's an end in sight. Okay, to me, that's part of driving a really good experience. So if I nail 2 and 3, what happens with 5 is it becomes a lot easier to change people's behavior and get them focused on those business outcomes. So this is where I said, for the most part, this is kind of a linear process, but this is one where, okay, we can't move any or further along this continuum of culture transformation if we don't get behaviors to change. So if you fast forward about 10 years into my UPS career, not that safety was not important, but safety became, we got a district manager in who was adamant that we are going to fix the safety problems we have. And if you can picture UPS, it's a lot of physical work, right? So people are getting the sprains and the strains and muscle pulls, that kind of stuff, because they're lifting constantly. But one of the biggest problems is that if you're inside a UPS facility, there's a lot of conveyor belts, okay? And getting on a moving conveyor belt, major no-no. You don't do that. It's unsafe. But what would happen is we would have supervisors that would get on those belts and walk along them as they're moving, because it's almost like the people movers at the airport, right? You're getting from one end of the warehouse to the other really fast. And while they're doing that, they're kind of shouting instructions out so they can touch a whole lot of people, okay? So it was very much a do as I say, not as I do environment. Like, okay, hourlies, thou shalt not get on a moving conveyor belt, but I'm a supervisor. I can get up there and I can do this. What it took to change that mindset and that culture was a supervisor getting fired for being on a moving belt. Now, that may sound like an obvious thing to do to those of you in the room today, but let me tell you, at that point in time, the culture of UPS was that, if you were in management, you had to commit a cardinal sin to get fired. And being on a moving conveyor belt was a no-no, but it wasn't a cardinal sin until this district manager came in and said, no, it's a cardinal sin now. You're out. Because I'm not going to have management doing things and telling people you can't do them. So it was all about that behavior change. So whether you're focused on safety because you're in a manufacturing environment, or you're focused on your customer service behaviors because you're in a customer-facing environment, whatever it is, you have to decide what behaviors need to change so that we can hit those concrete business outcomes. And for UPS at that point in time, one of the concrete business outcomes was reducing our injury rates, because we were getting pressured from OSHA. That our injury rates were too high. They were above the industry standard. So it became a concrete business outcome. Now, this isn't a case study in how to change your safety culture, although there are pieces in here, but we had to start with that emotional commitment from employees. We had to do the things we're listing out here. So there are culture microcosms, even within your bigger culture, that will get impacted by this entire process as well. But we can't go any further in our culture transformation if our people don't change behavior. So there's a bank that I'm currently working with, a bunch of their what they call their area sales managers, and in their environment, these are the folks that the branch managers report to. And we're trying to change. We have a test group going through a coaching program with me that's all about changing their behaviors, getting them out of the office, getting them out into the branches, getting them out with their customers. They kind of got into this mode during COVID of, oh, well, we can just sit here and do Zooms and everything's fine. Well, okay, we're not in a pandemic anymore. You need to get out from your office. You need to go out and be effective. You need to really be a leader again. So we're working on changing their behaviors, and it's a process. but it's something that this particular bank feels is really important from their cultural imperatives, that higher level management needs to be out there with the people, not sitting behind their desk. So we're working on that behavior change. Okay, Paul, back at you.
So step 6 is promote citizen-led innovation. And this is all about just getting your team's ideas, your employees' thoughts and perspectives on how we could do things better. And again, we have one idea about how things work, and then there's a whole other sort of process as to how they really work. And Ed, I heard you tell that story really well about your wife and the experience at UPS again. Just what happens when you go changing a process without doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to share that story?
Oh yeah. So my wife is in sales at UPS, and so she's out on shipping docks regularly. And a couple of years ago, she came home and she said, "Oh yeah, this client, they brought an industrial engineering firm in. They totally changed how they ran their shipping dock, like the routes that the forklifts were taking, how people were doing stuff, just to create all this efficiency, and tens of thousands of dollars they spent on this study. Right? They change everything." She goes back for another visit the next quarter, and everything's back to the way it was. And she asked the shipping manager, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "It didn't work. We spent all this money. It didn't work." One of the things they found out is this consulting company came in and said, "Oh, logistically, this is what you need to do." They never talked to the employees about the process. They just did it, and it didn't work. And it didn't work not because the employees didn't adopt it, but because these folks from afar never took the time to say, okay, why are people doing what they're doing and the way they're doing it now? And if we're going to show them a different way, then we need to get them on board with that. But in this case, this was purely a case of they didn't ask the people, "Hey, what do you think about this? What's this going to do to traffic flow and your ability to be productive for us?" Huge financial mistake for the company.
Yeah, so this citizen-led innovation, it's really a two-way conversation. Like you have to tell people what you want, but you also have to ask them, how can you do that for me? And how can we make this something you want to do? And I guess in this day and age, it's just never been more important. Like in generations, like our generation, like Generation X and boomers, like we were used to being told the rules, and this is how things are. This is what happens if you don't follow them. And everybody just followed the rules and things just worked. But we have these new generations coming in, and the rules just all of a sudden changed. And it's crazy, right? Like just you can't tell people to do things because they'll quit. If they're not happy with the way things are going, they will go somewhere else. And even if they don't have an option, they still quit. You don't even understand like what's really going on. But the fact of the matter is, like, our generations are getting more socially conscious. They're getting more environmentally conscious. They think more about equity and inclusion, and the way that business has worked all along is starting to find that there's some cracks. So we have to, as leaders, we have to make what we want them to do more aligned with what they want. So if people are looking for environmentally conscious, socially equitable kind of companies, we have to align with that, and then make it such that them contributing to us benefits them, gets them what they value. So it always comes back to that alignment of values. So when we're talking about citizen-led innovation, we have to find out, how would they do things if they got to design the process? How would they want it to be? And then we have to take, well, oh, okay, you know what? We need them to hit that mark. We need everyone going in the same direction. We need everyone with the same vision. Is there a way that I could take this business objective that we talked about right at step number 1 and turn it into a vision that's aligned with what our people want, what our people believe, what would motivate them to actually get to work on it? How can we just say it so that everybody's happy and agrees that, yeah, that's the destination that we're going to get to. And then when we open up our ears and let people say whatever they want, how many good ideas are coming our way? How many, of course, there's going to be some ideas that we're like, you know what, we just can't do that, or no, that would never work. But when we're open to having this feedback and this input, there's, out of 10 ideas, one will be good, right? One will be amazing. And it would be something that we never thought of ourselves. So it's really open communication and understanding that, hey, give and take is actually better than like, top down telling people how it is, because the better ideas come when we treat our people like, well, they are intelligent people that actually want to do something good on the planet. And if we have them focused on doing it here, everybody's going to win. So it's conversations, keeping open, and realizing that there's a big head shift, like from how things were to how things are. And the time when the shift is really prevalent, it's right now. So it's a new way of looking at things, and it's just taking a little bit of transition for us. So I'll throw it back to you, Ed.
Yep. Thank you. So here's the thing with culture. One of the things you're going to find, and I mentioned this in some of the opening remarks, is that because this is such a comprehensive journey, we know what you're going to see is as you start to uncover, you're working on your citizen-led innovation, you're going to find issues that need to get resolved, issues that are maybe impacting people's emotional commitment or their work experience. And so that means that though you may be focused on just those couple of positions initially, you're going to see the tentacles start to reach out to other areas of the organization. So we have to understand that, like any other company transformation, this is going to be comprehensive. It's going to impact how you recruit, how you manage performance, how you promote people and develop them in your organization. It's going to impact how you deliver value to your customers, how you do business operationally. I mean, you're going to see a lot of these things bubble to the surface. And so we have to be ready for that. And we have to say, okay, certain things we're going to put in the parking lot for right now because we can't address them, but we have to get to them. Others we're going to work on right now because they can't wait. And so when people say, well, we want to change our culture, oftentimes what they're saying is, well, we think our people are unhappy. What are we going to do about it? But true culture transformation comes back to this journey that we're on to transform the entire company. When you have the people emotionally committed and we've provided that great work experience and they're involved in the innovations, they're going to uncover things and say, hey, what about this? What about that? And we got to be ready to tackle those things as they come out in levels of importance. But it is going to uncover a lot of challenges for you. And so, this is the caveat section of this, that if you're not ready to commit to a truly comprehensive journey, and journeys don't happen overnight, then be careful about starting this process too soon. Make sure your organization is actually ready for culture transformation first. And if you, I just kind of thought about this, but if you want to know if you're ready for culture transformation, go ahead, how do we know? Shoot me an email. I've got a neat little checklist that you can fill out to know if you're ready for culture transformation. So I'm happy to send that to you if you like. So now we look at a different group of people, and these are your cultural influencers. So remember before we were looking at our most impactful positions. Now we're looking at people. Your cultural influencers are the people who, when they talk, other people listen. When you walk into the break room, they're the person that's holding court. They're talking, 3 and 4 other people are listening. Okay. When they do something, the group does something. Hopefully you've identified, I like to call them informal leaders, okay? Because they're the ones that influence your culture the most. Now, here's a scary thing. Doesn't mean they're influencing it the way you want them to, Okay. So don't think, oh, these are our cheerleaders. Well, let's just go find the cheerleaders. No, 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 no. There could be some people out there who are influencing your culture in a negative way. And I would argue those are the folks you got to get on board first. The cheerleaders, they're the easy ones. The Debbie Downers, they're the ones that you say, okay, we got to sit them down. They care. And that's why, a lot of times people say, oh, all they do is complain. Well, okay, we've got our complainers out there. We all know them. But sometimes people are complainers because they want to see change. And so these poor folks, maybe they're not going about it the right way, but in their own way are trying to tell us, look, I know I'm a complainer, but I just want to see something change around here. And they're complaining because they care. Now, if they're the chronic complainer, maybe there's something different there. I get that. But for the most part, what I've found is that the biggest complainers are oftentimes the ones who care the most. They're just not showing it the way we might prefer, so we tune them out. But these folks are influencing your culture because they're talking about the kinds of things that maybe other people care about, and they're just the most vocal. So you're going to want to engage with some folks that maybe otherwise you'd say, oh gosh, Ed, you're really telling me I got to sit down with these folks and listen to them? That could be all that they want. And they may have something really good to tell us. So we have to, when we do this, and maybe it is in a one-on-one instead of a focus group kind of environment. I mean, Paul's kind of a master at trying to figure out, okay, given the situation, do I want to talk to someone one-on-one? Or do I want to put it in a group environment because it'll be softened or it'll be heightened or whatever, right? Once he gets a bead on what's going on in an organization, you know what's going on in your organization. So you'll know at this point what's going to be the best way to engage these folks. Do I want to talk to them as a group, or do I need, excuse me, do I need some one-on-one time with them? Paul, do you have anything you want to add there?
I think, like you said, if there's somebody that you think is either they are the cheerleader or they are vocal and cause you some grief, that's when you want to bring somebody in that that isn't that is a third party and not going to they're not going to hold back, because we want to hear it all.
Yep. Okay, now let's talk about what we do with the folks who won't get on the bus. So let's talk about that whole bus scenario for a moment. So we all know okay, get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Okay, yeah, great. The problem is there's always going to be people who don't want to get on the bus. What are we going to do with them? The easy answer is, well, the bus has got to leave. We fire them. Okay, that's the easy answer. It may not be the best answer. Okay. Do I think that as the culture bus is moving, that they'll get on it eventually? In rare cases, honestly, is our experience. So at some point, you may have to have the discussion with these folks that it's time to get on the bus, or maybe it's time to separate. That may be a discussion we have to have. And some of these folks could very well be important players for you. So I had a situation with a public accounting firm where in their structure, a senior manager was one step away from making partner. Okay. And so basically by the time you got to be a senior manager, you were really good at your type of accounting. But there was also the expectation now at that level that you're starting to bring work to the table. You're out in the community, you're developing business relationships, you're bringing billing revenue into the firm. This organization had a senior manager who was just an incredible tax accountant, knew the tax regs inside and out. The partners loved him. People loved working for him. He had no desire and really, honestly, not really the ability to be a revenue generator. So we had discussions with him about like, look, you want to make partner, but partner is all about bringing revenue to the table. He's like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think it's my skill set. So eventually, it wasn't necessarily that he was unwilling. I think he was unable, but it still falls into this bucket. we had to have the discussion like, look, we need to free this spot up so that we've got some up and coming tax managers that need to have the senior manager experience, right? So he agreed to leave the firm. Now it's actually a really cool story because everybody wins in the end. So he leaves us, and he was a great guy, 20 years with us. I mean, everybody loved him. He was fun to be around, and he was good at what he did. Okay. But that separation allowed other managers now to get up through that block, right? He found a partner position in a firm that had a partner retiring, and they needed someone who could simply take over a book of business and manage it. It fit his skill set perfectly. So in this case, he wasn't unwilling, he was kind of unable, but it still worked. Yes, that firm lost a good employee, but it was a necessary ending because he had maxed out what he was capable of doing for them. So these endings, this pulling the bus out of the station without these folks is really important sometimes. Now, the other side of it is, so you have someone who's not willing to get on the bus, okay? What do you do if someone is standing in front of the bus, that the bus can't move? Now, I'm not advocating violence. Some people have said, step on the gas, run them down, right? You've got to remove them from the front of the bus. And I believe that if you've got that person, that is a termination. Like if they're keeping us from actively moving forward, this isn't a conversation about, hey, come on, get on the bus. Let's do this together. They're keeping us. They're inhibiting our growth as an organization. It's time to move on. I just had lunch with the owner and CEO of one of my clients the other day, and we were talking about this very thing, that there is a person on their executive team who is just not getting on the bus with us. We've been on a transformation with them for about the last 18 months, and he continues to not hit his goals, to not actively attempt to hit his goals, to not be active in our leadership discussions. It's time. We're ready to say, okay, he's done. Because the reality is that they're worried that, well, now we don't have someone in that position. And my response is, well, he's not doing his job anyway. So what's the difference at that point? So I think that from an unwillingness standpoint, again, put a slash there and put unable as well, so that you can determine what you really want to do and how you want to best handle that situation. And then finally, we want to track our results, because everything started with number one in identifying business solutions, or business outcomes, excuse me. So we want to make sure that we're tracking results and correcting our course as needed. Be very, very careful with this one. I have an organization I'm working with right now. They're not doing course corrections. They're doing full-on pivots every 4 to 5 months. As soon as they run into a barrier, they say, well, I guess that doesn't work. Let's go over here. And it's like chasing the rabbit. People are quickly getting to the point of saying, well, what are we doing? What is going on here? Every couple of months, we're told to focus on something else. You want to talk about destroying all the work you just did through these first 9 steps. So there may need to be course corrections. You may find that one of the things you started out measuring as a concrete outcome, you're hitting it and it's not impacting the overall company goals of revenue or customer generation or whatever. Then it's time to say, okay, maybe we picked the wrong goal there. So let's swap that out. We gave it the old college try. Let's swap it out with something that may be a little more impactful. Just be very, very cautious about doing the constant pivot simply because you run into a roadblock. Okay. So you can see these 10 steps. I mean, this is comprehensive, right? This isn't easy. This is actually quite difficult. It's quite lengthy. The steps themselves are simple, but it's the implementation of those steps that gets difficult. So I know we're right at the top of the hour. We have 2 more things real quick. So I'm gonna borrow you for just 2 more minutes. So let's have fun. I want all of you to get your phones out. You probably had them on mute or quiet. Get them all out. Okay, I told you earlier, if you want to know more about developing a good employee experience, I'm going to tell you how to do it. Here's how we're going to do it. All right, so I want you to go ahead and scan this QR code. It's going to take about a minute of your time to give us a little bit of feedback on today's webinar. But if you do that, you're going to get my white paper on designing a good employee experience. So how's that for a free trade of time? Okay. It's also going to ask you if you want to hear more from us, if there's a way in there for you to let us know that. I think most of you have been through some of these webinars. We're not on the phone, hounding you for business, those kinds of things. That's not our MO. But if you want to hear more from us, you want to chat more about what we've talked about today, there's an option inside the QR code there to say, yeah, give me a shout. Let's chat further about company culture. So go ahead and please take a moment and do that for us. And while you're doing that, just a quick reminder that next month we get back on the noon train. Today was the exception to the rule at 11 because I go on stage at 1 o'clock. So that wasn't going to work to have a noon with all of you. So we get back on the noon train next month. Paul, before I wrap up, do you have anything else you want to mention while folks are finishing up their survey?
I think other than, yeah, if you fill this this thing out, Ed's going to know if he should send you the culture checklist, and I think that's a great thing, a great start. Mm-hmm. And also, if you have any questions about how to start identifying the folks that you want to talk to, or what it takes to start aligning these stories between what you hear from management and what you're hearing from your people, because in HR you're right in the middle, being pulled in all different directions, then just have a chat with us. We love solving those sort of conundrums.
Yeah, thank you. So, wow, today was probably like drinking from the fire hose. We threw a lot at you. I kind of feel like the fire hose because I feel like there was a lot of stuff coming out. And so I'm glad that you spent the time with us. And I know I think for the first time ever in 10 months, Paul, we actually went over our hour by a little bit here, which I want to respect your time and things. And so I'm glad you hung with us for just a couple more minutes. So to kind of sum everything up, I want you to look at that 10-step process. I want you to give it thought. Before you say, oh, this sounds great. I love what Ed and Paul said about this part. We're going to go implement it. Really give it some thought. Bring it up at your management, your leadership team meetings. Talk about what are the implications if we start this process now. Because I think one of the worst things you could do would be to start it and not follow through. Is this the right time in your organization's life cycle to do this? Even if it's needed, is it still the right time? There might be other initiatives that need to be knocked out first or whatever. This is the old, don't jump in the water when you don't know where the bottom is. So be very careful about when you want to start this process, because it's going to be time consuming and you'll want to be able to stay focused on it. So with that, usually I would open up the chat for questions, but at this point, because I know we're a couple minutes past noon, and I know all of you have our emails. If not, you can hit me up at edcrow.com, and there's a way to contact me right there on the front page of my website. I'm happy to spend additional time with you if you have some questions about the things that we did on the webinar today. So with that, Paul, do you have any final words you'd like to toss out?
I'm all good. Thanks.
All good. All right.
Everyone.
Hey, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, especially for staying a couple minutes past the hour for us. And I hope you'll join us next month for the 8 key drivers of that great employee experience that we're going to talk about. And guess what? Those 8 drivers, they're not in that little white paper I'm sending you. That's all other stuff. So there's my tease that you got to come back next month. So thanks again for all your smiling faces. We'll see you in a few weeks. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.